Of course, about what occurred in Malawi last week. We're talking about the political protests over there. What would you say was really the fundamental cause behind that? Because the opponents of your government, of course, have different reasons. But what about you in particular? What do you think was the reason behind last week's protest in Malawi? Do you in fact call them protests, or do you call them something else?
Well, thank you very much, and indeed, but before I get into responding to your question, on behalf of my government and indeed on behalf of my president, we wish to secondly pass on our condolences again to the loss of life that took place during these senseless demonstrations. I call them senseless demonstrations as their main focus was not to be constructive in dialogue, but had an ulterior motive. As you will know, that these demonstrations were partnered by, first of all, the civil society, members of the concerned groups of the citizenry, and also NGOs, but also the members of the opposition. The opposition have always felt strongly in the country to find various channels of raising their concerns. And I think it would be critically important if I could be able to just take you back a little bit to see how the DPP came into government, particularly how the president, Professor Bingu wa Mutharika, had won the majority of the votes in the country. Your history will recall that in 2004, when the president was first elected, he was given a mandate by the people of Malawi through fair elections. And this mandate was to transform the country. And at that moment of time, when we went to elections, we were struggling to feed ourselves as a nation. In 2009, the president, after serving a period of 5 years, managed to score one of the largest percentages on the African continent. In fact, he scored over 66% of the total vote of the country. His vote was over 2.7 million total votes, more than his opposition, who was John Tembo, who scored 1.3 million. The point I'm trying to make to you, sir, is that the people of Malawi approved the work of what the DPP, through the president, was conducting. And the reason why we come through this challenging time right now is a combination of factors, but mostly that the opposition party are using all means possible to try and find a way of unstabling this current government. And I think during this program we may have a chance to look at the scorecard of what the president has achieved. After all, his mandate is from the people of Malawi.
Now, Ambassador Bora, there is no question that most people will definitely agree that when it comes to food security, President Bingu wa Mutharika seemed in fact to have the magic wand. There's no question that he made significant progress in that particular area, and the people of Malawi were able not only to feed themselves, but Malawi in fact was even able to export food to its neighbors, and even as far as places like Kenya. But what about the issues of civil liberties, really? What about the issues of civil liberties? You talk about a recent election in which he won by a landslide, and yet we do have reports, including, in fact, the Commonwealth report, which is usually very, very conservative and usually very supportive of incumbent presidents in the Commonwealth. But that particular report, frankly, did not say that the election was free, fair, and credible.
Well, first of all, I can't dispute because I don't have the report in front of me. But the elections were very much free, fair, and credible. The results which the ruling party, the Democratic Progressive Party, had scored through the country, the elections were monitored by not only the Commonwealth, but also the EU observers, as well as SADC parliamentarians and other prominent authorities who have confirmed that President Bingu wa Mutharika was legitimately elected to power. And in that manifesto of being legitimately elected to power, one of the achievements that we did, which you have cited yourself, was food security. You recall in the year 2004, because we'll have to go into why some of these demonstrations have taken place, Malawi was looking to feed over close to 4 million people. And the challenge was that we didn't have the resources at that particular time, or the visionary leadership. And when the president came in, he came in with his own philosophies, which ultimately, in the first instance, were shot down by colleagues in the IMF and the World Bank to support his ideas. But we had to insist and push ahead with the subsidy programs, which we intended to subsidize the poor farmers. We felt as a nation that it was not fair where in the West you can have a European farmer in a combined harvester costing a few $1,000,000, planting his field and plowing through his fields, and yet being subsidized. Yet the poor African woman with a baby on her back and a hoe cannot be subsidized for the price of a Coca-Cola. So we pushed ahead with our own subsidy programs, and in the year 2005, we managed to feed ourselves, and we managed to provide food for some of our neighbors, and the success story has gone from strength to strength. You'll also recall that not only is that a situation, but the life expectancies, which is, I believe, the ultimate indicator of a nation. Under the current leadership of the president, life expectancy has increased from year 39 years old to 49 years old. So that in itself is an indicator which you cannot dispute. Other indicators concerning one of the challenges was that this particular demonstration was because we have challenges in electricity generation, fuel shortages in Malawi. Well, the challenges which we have concerning the fuel shortages was not only experienced by this particular government, but has been experienced for a long time. The previous government had put in an organization and a company which was looked after and managed by the government to guarantee that the fuel supplies in the country would be secure.
I see.
Under the present administration, the World Bank insisted that we should privatize some of these entities, which included privatization of the petroleum industry to the private sector. And therefore, the government had little control in monitoring and managing the private sector and how they imported fuel. But also, our country, as you know very well, that our main commodities is tobacco. And the IMF insisted that our tobacco revenues be put to the commercial banks. As in the past, the revenues were kept to the Reserve Bank. And therefore, government could dictate what it buys. But through a developing economy and a maturing economy, we had to put our money through the advice of the IMF and the World Bank back to the commercial banks, which lent the citizenry money to conduct their businesses throughout the country.